Alright, Victorum Gaming fans and Hail Caesar fans, we're back with another in our series where we're covering the different factions for the game. And today we are taking a look at what's called North European Bronze Age, which is just a sort of a catch-all term here, basically. So I'm actually going to read the description here just to kind of bring everybody in and so we can get an understanding of what we're talking about with this here. And it does cover basically 14th through 8th centuries BC, roughly. So this is a fairly speculative list by nature, since the people of the time have left no record beyond the the cold and mute remains exposed by archaeology. So what we have here is a reconstruction based on later armies to produce what I intend to be a credible model of earlier warfare, with light infantry warbands forming the chief components of armies focused on raiding and feuding. The weapons chosen reflect archaeological finds, whilst the use of chariots is inferred from finds of carts and wagons, as well as later practice. Plainly, this is a list that could be framed differently and expanded almost indefinitely with any number of colorful and entertaining warriors. So, some of the searches here, right? So Atlantic Bronze Age, Nordic Bronze Age, etc. And there's actually some pretty decent videos out there on like YouTube and stuff like that that have some cool documentaries to give you an idea of what some of these early people might look like. So model-wise, it's going to be a bit of a challenge, I think, maybe putting that together. So you're definitely going to have to do some digging, but certainly some kit bashing with some of the plastics that Warlord has and etc. Other companies, you can definitely put together something pretty interesting. So moving on then, what kind of list is this? Well, it's basically going to be a little bit different than our other Bronze Age lists that we've been looking at. And really it's going to be mainly infantry based. As we can see here, 75% of the army has to be infantry, other than skirmishers, since those don't really count. And then up to 10% can be chariots, and there's no other cavalry or anything like that. So then the usual restrictions here on divisions and skirmishers per division. And it's not a huge list either, kind of as you might guess from the description up above, right? Since we don't know too much about the period, it's kind of hard to have a pretty diverse list here. But what this is basically going to be a very light infantry list with a lot of skirmishers and just a hint of some light chariots for mobility and stuff like that. So still an interesting list. Could be really cool to collect, model, and stuff like that. And certainly something on the lesser known or lesser played scale. So definitely would be a change of pace from some of the more typical armies that tend to get a lot of the attention from collectors and players and stuff like that. So, and if you're up for a challenge too, obviously you don't have too many different types of units and stuff like that in the list either. And it's, again, it's mainly a light infantry skirmisher type army. So what do we got first here? Well, it's not necessarily lacking on firepower or combat power. So light infantry warband with mixed arms. So really solid clash value there of 8. We haven't seen that a lot lately, really, in our videos. A little bit of short range, t-shirt saves for the morale save there. 22 points a unit, so not bad. The sustain does drop off quite significantly, as we can see, and there's no special rules. If we wanted to basically downgrade this into a small unit, take off 7 points and drop the stats correspondingly. So and obviously you could field a lot of these units. That's kind of your mainstay. You do have kind of a little bit more of an elite unit here. Medium infantry chieftain's warband fielded as a small unit, which is a little unfortunate, but it still packs a hell of a punch for being a small unit. But you only get this one unit, so you might as well take it. But clash is 7, sustain drops to 4. And only a 1 on the short range, but a better morale save of 5 up, but they're tough fighters and stubborn, and come in at 1 point cheaper than the above unit. So you're giving up a little bit there, but the fact that you get some special rules to back it up is pretty cool too. And if you wanted to go a little bit more in on the unit, which again, you only get this one unit, you might as well go for it, I would say. Extra to field the chieftain's warband with double-handed axes, and what that does for you is it changes up the short-range game a little bit, but really you're getting that extra clash value, and then the special rules stay the same, all for 2 more points. Could certainly be worth it. And modeling-wise, it'd be cool to sort of show the double-handed axes, but paint and model these guys appropriately to really have them stand out compared to the other not so well equipped units in the army. And then we're already on to the skirmishers. So again, here's a whole lot of small units, as we've kind of gotten used to. So Javelin small units, the usual stats there: Clash of 3, Sustain 2, but you're not really buying these guys for actual hand-to-hand fighting. A little bit of short-range action there, no armor or no morale whatsoever on these skirmisher units. They all run from 11 to 12 points here. We can switch over to slings for that 1 extra point, well worth it for some actual long-range firepower. So a lot of these units will definitely help you out, just to whittle down whoever your opponent might be just a little bit, so that when you do make contact with your light and medium infantry above, you can then use your clash and hopefully cause enough damage to then shake and or break the opposition here, because you're definitely not going to last long when it comes to taking morale saves with this army. So anything you can do to put damage on them before contact is made is a good thing. And then skirmishers with bows as a small unit, you only get 1 of those, but then also the same sort of long range action there. And then, excuse me, we finally get on to the last little bit here, which again, chariots are up to 10% of the list. So, adds a little bit more mobility, and I would say a little bit more firepower in the sense of like combat damage, but a little bit different than some of the chariots that we've seen lately here. So Clash is 6 and Sustained is 5, so not necessarily all that great on that initial contact. It does have a 3 for short range, which is pretty cool, and really your best morale save in the whole list, which is a 4 up. No special rules or anything, but like the other chariot lists, or lists that do allow for chariots that we've seen lately with the Bronze Age stuff, you do have chariot runners too, to buff things up a little bit. So an overall pretty solid point cost and all that stuff. So and again, you only can have up to 10% of your units be chariots, so it certainly would be, I think, worth investing in at least 1 unit or so, depending on how big of a game you're playing, just to have something that stands out a little bit compared to your hordes of infantry, and can actually have that extra mobility and stuff like that. So. And then, interestingly, you might expect this to be like a lower leadership army or something like that with 7s, but here they're being pretty generous, I think. The commander and the general all have leadership 8 still, which again is pretty standard from what we've seen. So overall, it's a you could say it's like a early proto-barbarian-ish army, like Gauls, Germans, stuff like that, but just well into the Bronze Age still here. So so kind of like an earlier version of that. And if you're collecting and stuff like that, you could certainly use some of the existing kits and stuff out there to represent an earlier period in those tribes' development and stuff like that, until you get to later antiquity and stuff like that. So lots of cool options there still. You just got to do some work basically to on the model side of things. Yeah, like I said, it's a pretty cool list. Not too many frills or anything about it. It's pretty simple. Some infantry, skirmishers, and a little bit of chariots there. And definitely going to be a little bit more challenging to play. It's not again, it's not like, certainly not overpowered in any way if we're looking at it from like a competitive sense. And just a couple, actually 1 unit really of special rules. Definitely going to be up for a challenge in playing them, but again, this is going to be another one of those where you use your numbers to great effect here, and just lots of okay infantry that can be a little bit scary on the first turn, backed up by just tons of small skirmisher type units whittling away and harassing you and stuff like that. Definitely, I wouldn't say necessarily a good beginner army, just from the modeling, collecting, and playing side of it, but certainly a more experienced player, or someone who's likes to jump off the deep end into the history of like a faction or something like this, definitely a lot of opportunity there, and cool to see, just because again, it's an army like this doesn't get the attention that like a Roman or a Greek or Spartan or something like that necessarily tends to receive. So definitely excuse me, something a little bit more out of the way. So hope you guys enjoyed that little review of the North European Bronze Age, and again, lots of potential there, especially if you do some historical research. And so if you guys enjoyed the video here, smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't already, and then stay tuned for more faction reviews for Hail Caesar from Warlord Games.